Good morning and happy Father's Day to all of you fathers out there. Really excited about today's episode. As we told you last week, or earlier this week, I should say, we were going to be back on Sunday morning, and here we are. So I'm joined by Michael Washington as per usual. How you doing this morning, Michael?
Happy Father's Day to you, Sam. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there as well. I'm fantastic. Enjoying a little football this morning and now getting ready to talk some football. So
Definitely. I don't know what is going on, but for some odd reason, Facebook changed some settings. Speaking of the devil, and I cannot make my stream public while we're live for some reason on my personal profile anymore. So that's kind of annoying. But
that is kind of annoying, yeah.
it's always something, I swear. Always something. But anyway, lots to talk about today, especially in the injury categories. So, I mean, that might be a good place to start. Seemed like a lot of guys got banged up over the past couple of days of games.
Yeah.
So, let's see. I mean, do you want to start at the injuries or do you want to?
Well, I mean, Reggie Begelton obviously is one of the first ones that pops to my head. That's a huge loss for Calgary, though. I do got to say, they did spend a good first round pick on Damian Alford, and he kind of showed out a little bit yesterday in the game against Toronto. He made an impact to get a key first down on a drive after the Begelton injury. So, and receiver has been the one position that you and I discussed in the preseason that we felt like was really one of Calgary's strong suits overall. Like they all of a sudden had like an embarrassment of riches at that position where they didn't have that necessarily last year per se. It's still a big loss though, and I think it's going to impact that wide receiving room. But Vernon Adams is such a great leader, as far as the team is concerned. I think that they'll be okay, and I'm sure that Begelton will still make sure his presence is felt on the sidelines and in the locker room as well.
I would imagine so. And honestly, the only reason it really concerned me with Begelton is it was like shortly thereafter that Alford went down. And, it kind of looked bad at first, and then he got up and walked off on his own power. But I actually had not seen if he actually entered the game again. I was just kind of, watching the game and doing some other things as well. So I never really caught if he was in the game per se. But
he was not. He actually left the stadium on crutches.
Alford or Begelton?
Oh, sorry. Begelton. Did you say Alford? My apologies. I thought you were talking about Begelton. Yeah. Yeah, Alford got back in the game.
Okay.
I believe he did end up getting back in the game. So
I want to say I remembered hearing his name called after that. I wasn't really focused in on the fact that, he had left and had come back. So that was one of the things that I never really paid close enough attention to after I got back into the game. I had to step away for a moment at one point. So it definitely was concerning to me that you lose to your top 5, top 6 targets, especially when you suit up and start 5 receivers every week. So definitely was a concern, but sounds like he came back in the game and, maybe Calgary has escaped some issues there, but I feel bad for Reggie Begelton. Excuse me. He comes back. He comes into the game right after he catches his first pass of the game, goes down with an injury, and it seems like it's a serious injury because, like you said, he left the stadium on crutches, and that was his 72nd straight game with a reception. So there's a very real possibility that, if he misses next week, he breaks a streak that has lasted 3 or 4 years now. So definitely hoping he can get back by next week, but it's just one of those things, unfortunately streaks are meant to be broken, especially in sports. And when it comes to consecutive games played, it always seems like those have to come to an end at some point, but I'm sure he's very frustrated.
Yeah, I don't want to be, a Debbie Downer or a negative Nancy by any means, but it definitely looked like it possibly was going to be season ending. From my perspective, I'm not a doctor. I don't take that as gospel by any means, but just from what I saw and what it looked like to me, plus seeing how he left, the arena or the stadium, it really made me wonder if it was possibly season ending, unfortunately for Reggie.
No, that's fair. Honestly, once I saw him on crutches, I was a little more concerned about the status of his injury because obviously it seemed a little bit more real at that point. But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll have to see how things go for him, over the next week or two, and we'll probably get some news one way or another. But that was one of those things that definitely concerning if you're Calgary, even though we mentioned they've got great depth at wide receiver, but you don't want to lose your most reliable target and one of your veteran leaders this early in the season.
Yeah, I mean, and if you go take a look at the overall, uh, box score of that game, like like we talked about with the receivers from the standpoint, they still, Clark Barnes is still one of the strongest, receivers that this team has. So as long as they avoided any like real major, injuries with Alford and stuff, which I believe they did, they still have Jalen Philpott, and Dominique Rhymes is there. Tevin Jones could probably step up. So I think they'll probably sign somebody to bring in for depth purposes, but I think they might be okay at the top for as long as Alford also wasn't hurt on a significant level, and it's not one of those nagging injuries. He wasn't targeted again, but he did. Um, I do believe he did return. I just don't know if it was the reason he wasn't targeted again because he was ineffective because of that. So um, we'll see. But if they lose Alford and they lose, Bagleton, I think that they're still okay for the most part, but depth really starts becoming a worry.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Anytime you can lose multiple position or players at the same position, it's going to become a concern. Especially, like I said, when those guys are both considered to be a large part of the offense at this point. So definitely got to be concerning if you're a Stampeders fan, regardless of the status of Alford going forward. But losing Bagleton, that's a huge blow. There's no way around that, unfortunately.
Mm.
But looking at some of the other injuries and players that did not suit up yesterday, another one that caught my attention, I think we talked about it a little bit on Wednesday, was Thomas Bertrand Hudon. Obviously, he kind of had a breakout game in week one after AJ Ouellette exited the game with a head injury. Ouellette
Mm-hmm.
ended up starting this game. Kadeem Kaderi, who we talked about last week as well. Um, it was the running back two in that situation. So, obviously there was a reason why they brought in Kadeem Carey, but at the same time, excuse me, at the same time that was interesting to see after the breakout game by Bertrand.
Well, I think with Bertrand Judon and his status, I think one of the main reasons that they did end up going out to go get Kadeem Carey was because they were concerned a little bit about the depth behind AJ Ouellette. But Kaderi didn't. Kadeem Carey didn't. Kadeem Carey, sorry, my apologies, didn't really like have a super big impact. I mean, he did average 6.5 yards per carry as he gets acclimated to this offense. But even with Bertrand, Judon having Hudon, sorry, having a big outbreak, I actually think that the Kaderi signing is an improvement at that backup position. It's just I'm almost wondering what's going to happen when Bertrand comes back, though, because Saskatchewan obviously really liked Bertrand Hudon. They didn't sign Kadeem right away. Like at the start of the year, they didn't sign him even though he was cut before week one.
Yeah.
It took like a little bit of them being banged up at that position to sign him. So I'm very curious as to what's going to happen with Carey, if he's going to go back down to the practice squad at that point, or if they're going to carry three running backs and kind of go short somewhere else.
I was wondering that myself as well. I mean, Kadeem Carey came out and said before he was signed last week that he was willing to be on the practice squad because he wanted to be in Saskatchewan with the Rough Riders. So, maybe there's a situation where they do put him back on the practice squad because he's okay with that. I definitely think that the only two options here are him going back to the practice squad and them carrying three running backs, unless one of those guys ends up on season and ending IR and they get a roster exemption. Because at that point, I mean, you definitely do not want to get rid of Thomas Bertrand Hudon, especially because his value on special teams, and I doubt it would even be a conversation at that point. But
right.
I guess the next question is, who do you bench for Kadeem Carey? You know, that's another American in your ratio. So that could be a whole nother other factor that we haven't considered, you know, in terms of the overall roster makeup. So I mean that'd be my next question. Would be, you know, who's going to take a seat to Bertrand Houdon, um, or Carey if they're activated.
You know, Carey saying that he was willing to be on the practice squad because he wants to be in Saskatchewan is, uh, I think, inadvertently makes it a little more difficult for the Rough Riders coaching staff and front office to make a decision with him, because while yes, he's willing to do it, uh, that is a leadership like type of statement, right? Like, I'm willing to do this for the team because I want to be here. That's hard to take out of the locker room and off the field on a regular day basis, right? Because players rally around stuff like that, right? Because that's a team first mentality. That's a, you know, yeah, I was a star in this league for, you know, X amount of years with Toronto or, you know, whatever, but like, I'm willing to, you know, do this type of
Yeah,
situation, right? You know, so uh yeah, it plays a factor a little bit into the ratio side of things. I'm sure that they can find a way around it or whatever. I just think it's going to be hard for them from a leadership standpoint to want to put him back down on the practice squad and not have him at least in uniform on the sideline. I know this
yeah,
seems weird because the uniform doesn't necessarily change somebody's leadership qualities. It's just he can be an impact and a difference maker, you know, when he's on the field and acclimated to an offense. So it's just you know what it is. It's really, like I talked about with Calgary. It's kind of an embarrassment of riches at running back for
yes,
Saskatchewan, and it's a team that is one of the better teams overall in the league when you're looking at roster construction and just at every position. It's just straight. It's stable. There's good players at every spot on the field on offense and defense, and you bring in a guy like Carey who has been known to winning. It's hard to. It's going to be hard for them to make a decision somewhere.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And I mean, I think part of the reason you make this move now is, you know, because of what happened last year. You know, you lose
Mm.
AJ Ouellette for a long stretch of time. You have to go out and buy. You need to go out and grab
Oh,
Reichwell Armstead to make it through the rest of the season. And, you know, he ends up being a very impactful player for your team. But at the same time, if he didn't happen to come available a couple weeks before because of, you know, concerns in Ottawa, you know, how does that season end for you? And we're in a similar situation right now with, you know, if Kadeem Carey hadn't have been released in final cuts for Toronto, you know, what are you doing there, that backup position? And you know, how do you go forward from there? You know, so that's a tough question to answer if Kadeem Carey's not on the market, because I don't even know. I mean, maybe Walter Fillicher. He no way, he signed somewhere, right?
who? Fletcher?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe Thomas Fletcher signed somewhere. Let me just find it real quick. It is
Um,
Thomas, right?
I thought it was Walter. I could be wrong.
Walter, sorry, that's right. The Thomas is Bertrand, right?
Yeah, but I'd be curious to see, you know, like who's the next top back on the market. I mean, I don't have that information right off the top of my head at the moment. I probably should, to be honest, but it's just one of those things where, like, it just seems like they keep getting hit with this really advantageous timing with, you know, veteran backs coming available right before they need them. So I definitely think that they learned their lesson last year and realized that, hey, you know, like, uh, why are we going to hesitate, especially now that we have an injury? We might as well go get somebody we know we can count on from the jump. And, you know, if anything else happens to Ouellette and Thomas Bertrand Houdin, whose injury is prolonged, then, you know, we have somebody we know that can step in and be an impact player as a starter right now. Was 1,000-yard back literally last season. So I mean, I think that's a very smart move by Saskatchewan, which it seems their formula is to run the ball and play defense, and it was very successful for them last year. So, you know, let's hope that they can be just as successful this year, despite the injuries already.
Yeah, and honestly, I do not see that Fletcher signed anywhere, to be honest with you. It looks like he's still a free agent from everything that I'm seeing here.
Well, then I guess that would probably be by
Fletcher
default
would
the next guy.
Fletcher then would be the next, best available player. I'm also wondering if there's something going on with Fletcher if he's not fully healthy. Because it's weird that a guy his caliber is, still a free agent after this point. You know, obviously his and Carey's release were kind of shocked, especially considering the fact that Fletcher was just signed to a 2-year extension. At the beginning of the year or the end of last year? So I wonder if he's just not fully healthy and there's something going on with him.
Could be
on that front. But yeah, I don't see his name on the transaction guide here. I'm back at early June now, so I'm assuming that he just hasn't signed anywhere at this point in time.
Maybe I'm mistaken. I could have sworn he signed with someone, but maybe I'm blanking or I'm mistaken for somebody else.
It's possible I've missed it myself, and maybe it's just not updated yet. But on the CFL official transaction site, I do not see his name other than release here.
Sure.
So
not overly important either way. Just kind of curious who would be the next guy up in that scenario, and maybe we'll see that scenario unfold later this year, especially with the way that AJ Ouellette has seemingly had quite a few injuries over the past couple of years. And, obviously you can't blame the guy for a head injury. That could happen to anybody. But at the same time, his injury history.
Oh, yeah. Style.
100%.
The guy's super athletic. The guy's athletic. Let's face it. He's not the most athletic guy out there overall, but he is an extremely athletic individual. And he's also a rugged SOB. He's a bigger back. He likes contact. So essentially that's his running style. We see it with running backs for the most part. And when you carry the ball so much like running backs do, it wear and tear on you over time. So, yeah.
100%. Definitely agree on that. Adam tuning in says Happy Father's Day all. Appreciate you tuning in, Adam. You seem to be one of our biggest supporters recently. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, Adam, thank you so much. And also Happy Father's Day to you if you're a father. If not, then happy Sunday. And thank you for joining us on this Father's Day, regardless, either way.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you guys spending your morning with us to talk some CFL. Quite a few different subjects still left to touch on. And actually, we're not even done with the injury information. In that same game, or actually, sorry, BC played Winnipeg, right?
Yeah.
My fault. So not in that same game. In the BC Winnipeg game, we actually had two major injuries that came out of that one. Brady Oliveira left the game after looking extremely explosive on 2 carries where he rushed for 49 yards. Nathan Rourke also left the game due to injury, but it was said he tried to return, and the team opted to be cautious at that point when they were down by 2 scores, I believe, late in the game. So, man, it seems like already we're losing some of the top running backs in the league to injury, which is obviously a concern. But at the same time, hopefully Oliveira can come back. But in his wake, we had another breakout player, Mathew Peterson, who just, man, he lit it up. So, it seems like there's a lot of depth at the running back position this year. And it seems like some of these teams were somewhat prepared for their veteran starters to get injured in this case.
Yeah, Oliveira's situation was weird because it came on a breakout run, and he was looking really good, and the tackle didn't even really look to be all that bad. It looked like it might have been an arm or shoulder of some sort. I didn't look super severe in the sense of possible season-ending injury, but you never know with the way these players land. Sometimes it could have been a torn pec, for all we know, and it will put him out for the year. He did try to play that next play. Thankfully, it didn't go to him because I don't know how that would have worked out for him if they had tried. But he came off the field right after that, and he didn't return. So hopefully it's nothing too severe. Hopefully it's only like a couple week injury at most for him. Hopefully it's just like a strain or even a stinger. Honestly, stingers sometimes could be so severe that you don't, it takes a week to even get back from that. So, but that's the least worrisome injury in the long term than something like torn or pulled, or you know what I mean. So, uh, and as far as Nathan Rourke was concerned, I think it was just precautionary. I think he'll be all right. He'll probably have some limited practices throughout the course of the week, but he'll be good to go for BC next week.
Yeah, it certainly
It just
seems
didn't.
that way.
It just didn't seem super severe with him, at least. So
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree on that, and I assume he will be back, and honestly, I'm hoping Oliveira is back too, because I mean, man, that 1-2 punch with Peterson and Oliveira could prove to be a very potent backfield if Peterson can keep up what he did this past week.
the biggest thing is too is Oliveira may even come back, and they may still use Peterson to kind of work it, lighten Oliveira's workload a little bit too. Like they don't throw Oliveira right back into the wolves. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. These running backs, it's going to be a little bit curious to see how these teams address this running back situation. But a team like Winnipeg, you're starting to see why some of these why these teams made certain moves at running back. So far, I think Toronto's the only one with the Kadeem Carey cut that was a little. He was in Toronto, right? Yeah, he was.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it seems like it might be the only one that's kind of questionable at this point, because their run game, their overall game in general, hasn't looked very good through 2 weeks.
Agreed. And one last running back to discuss who also got hurt, and I did not see if he re-entered the game either, but Deontay McMahon, I believe is how he wants his name pronounced, it sounds like. He was injured as well. It sounded like a lower leg or a foot injury. It seemed like they were working on his foot in particular when he was on the sideline. So he only carried the ball two times as well. Was not very effective in his 2 carries, and then Mayan Williams stepped in and had a day. So another breakout performance from him. So I mean, we can go ahead and transition over and talk about some of the breakout players, and we can start right there with him. I mean, were you surprised to see Mayan Williams come in and just kind of look like a beast immediately?
So I know you're not much of a college football guy, but do you know where Mayan Williams played?
I do not.
Without looking it up, you don't know where he played. So Mayan
No.
Williams was at Ohio State. Mayan Williams was recruited there, but the crazy thing about Mayan Williams was he kept Travion Henderson, who was just a second-round pick in the NFL, off the field in Henderson's freshman year, because he was so damn effective for how he played at Ohio State. Honestly, I'm not surprised Mayan Williams actually had the game that he had, and I would not be surprised if Mayan Williams, if he sticks it out with the CFL and doesn't come back down here to the States, isn't one of the best running backs in the CFL in a couple of years. He has that potential. He's that good. So he's a name to keep an eye on, and honestly, it may even be to the point where he ends up being the starting running back, moving forward, because he does all the right things and he's talented enough to do it. I don't know what their situation is, what the coaching staff looks like with him. There may be intricacies like with special teams and stuff that he doesn't necessarily do. I'm not sure. I don't know what his role is overall. But as far as a pure running back is concerned, not only does he fit the CFL style perfectly, he's also talented enough to make a name for himself up north.
Yeah, I mean, looking over his stats at Ohio State, honestly, I can see why you think that. I mean, in 2022, he had 825 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns, averaged 6.4 yards per carry. Looks like 6 yards per carry for his entire college career. So maybe his performance with Toronto this past weekend was not really all that big of a surprise. I guess the one big surprise here is he caught literally his career high in college in passes in his first game in the CFL, or first real impact in the CFL. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, basically 18 total touches, 127 yards total. Just an impressive performance from the rookie CFL player. So would love to see him continue to develop, and maybe he can become one of those elusive superstars we heard about this offseason.
You know, and honestly, Mayan Williams, it might have been the reason why they were comfortable letting go of Carey. It just didn't show out in their first game. So like, or was this their first game? No, this was their second game. This was their only two. He just wasn't there in the first game. So uh, maybe Mayan Williams was the reason why they felt comfortable letting Carey go. I'm not sure, but I would not be surprised if this was his chance here to show the coaching staff and to show the CFL what he's capable of doing and being like by all means. Because like you said, it was a big game. Calgary just at that point I think had put the game away, but him being able to still do that, um, playing from behind is pretty incredible. So
Definitely agree. And we already talked about Mathew Peterson and his impact on Winnipeg. The other player that I've got listed on my breakout players list this week is Davis Alexander. And I know that's kind of a cheap one right there, because obviously he's 5-0 as a starter and all that. But he threw for a career high 344 yards against Ottawa, had a touchdown and interception, ran once or twice, and ultimately found a lot of success in this game and really kind of cemented that he can be the guy that carries that passing offense and doesn't necessarily need, to be buoyed by short throws and intermediate throws because he averaged 10.8 yards per attempt in this game. So just a really good performance by him. And then also you could also talk about Austin Mack and Travis Teese for Montreal as well. Travis Teese comes out, rushes 12 times for 75 yards, had 2 catches for 25 yards, also handled some punts and kick returns. So I mean, he's a player to watch, and I know we've kind of been discussing him the past couple weeks, and why they opted to move on from other more veteran players. But he's a guy that I think is a future star as well. Maybe not to the point of getting NFL interest again, but he definitely is a guy who's going to be around for a few years, I believe.
yeah, and I think that when Montreal invested in him, I think it was may have raised some eyebrows because of whatever, but clearly they made the right choice. Clearly they saw something in him, and this could also just be one of those situations where it's a player that fits the system and fits the style that they want to do over there in Montreal, right? He may not have the same success if he was somewhere else. It's very possible. I think he's a super talented guy. I think that he put up some really good numbers this week against Ottawa. I think Ottawa is struggling right now, especially offensively. So I think playing from behind is going to be. They need to figure a way to figure that out. But Montreal overall, and maybe the Fletcher move was to try to help alleviate some of that cap signing that they did with Alexander. I'm not really sure, but this is another team is loaded at wide receiver, in my opinion. Any one of those guys inside the top 4 on that team could have a huge game at any given time. So Alexander is in a really good position, in really good shape with this team, and Montreal's just a really solid team overall. And maybe that's all you needed to be able to watch him grow into becoming the quarterback that they expect him to be. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a cop out, sure, but it's not something that I think is like a stretch by any means at all.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, you have a good point there. Montreal has a very solid wide receiver group. And in that case, actually, it was nice to see Austin Mack kind of have that rebound year. They haven't really, rebound week. They haven't really had that performance from him in a long time. In fact, this was his first time he's topped 100 yards in a regular season game since September 2nd of 2023, breaking a streak of 10 regular season games that he went under 100 yards receiving. So when you consider the fact that he was just in the NFL last season, that's a big part of that. He missed most of the season, came back late. But it opens up another question that I wanted to pose to you, and I think is a good topic to kind of discuss here. But how long do you feel it takes a player, or should take a player, to get back into quote unquote CFL mode after they've been in the NFL and they've had to adapt back to the 4-down game, because we remember, if we look back to last season, not only did Austin Mack, I don't want to say struggle, but he didn't have his same impact after he came back. And then you could say the same thing about Nathan Rourke. Nathan Rourke came back. He struggled for the first couple of games before eventually kind of catching his stride. He comes out this season and he's firing, So it's one of those things where I think that maybe as fans, we think that transition is a little bit easier than it might actually be, because both of those guys are, were some of the best players in the CFL prior to leaving, came back, showed a lot of struggles, and then it took them a full offseason to kind of get back to that point where they can be the guys that they once were.
I think the transition from the CFL game to the NFL game is easier in a sense of playing, like the play style, because you know what to expect, you know what you're doing. It's a pretty straightforward, clean cut operation. There's really no real super gray areas. You're not dealing with high motions, you're not dealing with the 1 yard off on the balls type of situation, things like that. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, like Nathan Rourke didn't play college in Canada, right? He played here in America with, like, his brother did, like Curtis did, right?
I believe so.
So, you're talking about him not playing 3-down football, because I believe their colleges up there play 3-down football as well. So, he didn't play the 3-down football going through college, which is, a big thing. Yeah, it's around there in Canada, and he probably grew up as a kid playing it. But when he got to college, it was definitely more of the 4-down game. I don't think the games are super, like, different per se. I just think it might be a little bit more of an adjustment coming from the 4-down game than to the 3-down game than it is the 3-down game to the 4-down game, because everything is already faster in the CFL. You have one less down. You have the high motion. It's go go go, whereas it's a little bit slower and methodical in the 4-down game. So I think the adjustment period is just when you go from the CFL to the NFL style, or 4-down style, you have to just basically slow yourself down a little bit. The game speed is still fast, but you have to slow yourself down on all the intricacies, right? Like it's not, you're not constantly go 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 go. And when you go back from that 4-down game to the 3-down game, you have to speed yourself up in those intricacies. And I think that's a little bit more difficult of an adjustment period, because you have to readjust to just how fast it moves in comparison to the 4-down game. And maybe CFL players will say something different. Maybe Nathan Rourke will say something different, and it's just he struggled to readjust, or Austin Mack just struggled to readjust, type of situation. But it just seems like, for some reason, when you take a look at a guy like Ricky Williams and how dominant he was at the 4-down game, he didn't really, dominate at the 3-down game the same way when he went up to Canada there. So it's, I don't know, but you don't really see a lot of CFL guys come down and dominate the 4-down game either. So it could be either or, I guess you could say, flip flop on that.
No, I think you're onto something there. Honestly, I don't think that the players that are going down from the CFL to the NFL are not necessarily, they're not dominating. How do I want to, I don't think the rule changes are what's preventing them from dominating. I think it's more their status on the particular roster that they sign with, right? So I think that that makes a lot of sense, what you said. I mean, because honestly, there is a lot of changes in the football that you're kind of used to when you've played the American game. When you go up to the CFL, obviously, that you just listed them all out. So it does make sense that they would have a struggle converting back. And just to throw this out there, Nathan Rourke attended Ohio and Fort Scott. So he did actually play his college ball with America. So
yeah,
he did not play the 3-down game. So he definitely, his only experience playing that style of play has been in the CFL. So that's definitely part of it as well, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's just one of those situations where, and it's probably, and let's be fair, it's probably an adjustment for both, no matter which way you go, right? It's definitely going to be an adjustment because the intricacies of the games are different. The smaller things, the play calls, all that stuff. They're all different. The terminology is probably still pretty close to the same, but it's still um, different enough that you still have to adjust to it. So it's going to struggle either way. I just think it's easier to fall back into the 4-down game, especially for, I want to say, Americans going from the NFL to the CFL and then back down to the NFL, or whatever you want to say it, because it's basically you're falling back into something that is familiar to you. Whereas a lot of the guys that play 3-down may have played 3-down at the the youth level, but you go off to college to play the 4-down game. You go there for 5 years, go to the 3-down game, then go back down to the 4-down game. I don't know. It just seems like for some reason that those guys that jump from the 3-down game to the 4-down game and then go back have to take a little bit longer of a period to adjust than vice versa. So maybe I'm just stretching there, but it just feels that way.
No, I think you're onto something there. I mean, it makes a lot of sense the way you just explained it, and maybe that just feels right. But let's talk about some of the latest news or stuff that came out of this weekend, and I guess one of the things that I wanted to start with was death by 1,000 kicks for Ottawa. Playing against Montreal, Jose Carlos-Matos goes 6 for 6 on field goals, adds 3 extra points for a total of 21 of 39 points scored by Montreal. Also, on top of that, Ottawa's kicker kicked a field goal and had 2 extra points as well. So a total of like over 30 points scored by kickers on the day. So definitely an interesting game, especially in one where I think they finished with 60 points scored on the day, if I remember correctly. It was 39-21.
Well, I'm laughing because it's such a nice reprieve, a nice break from actually seeing a good kicking game at the CFL level when I watch the LFA and I watch the ELF, and the Nordic Storm, one of the best teams in the league, have a receiver kicking for them because the kicking game is so atrocious up there. So it's nice to see, honestly, and I think that game is the epitome of or the definition of understanding that you can't take a good kicking game for granted, because if you don't have it, like you just said, I mean, the one kicker scored what, 23 points or 21 points for his team. His team scored 39. He literally scored more points than the offense and defense did combined. So you need to have those appreciations for those, and it doesn't go on, and it should always go noticed, and it should never be understated about how important special teams are, especially in a kicking game like that. So kudos to them, and I'm happy that they had strong kicking games, and it's awesome to see, from a football perspective, and when you watch all the football that we watch here at Shady Sports. So it's nice to see it.
Definitely agree, and it's kind of funny that you just said that about the LFA. Former LFA kicker Jose Carlos-Matos. So, obviously one of the better ones, and made his way up to the CFL. So part of that partnership between the LFA and the CFL, which is actually producing some pretty solid players over the past couple of years. So, love to see it, and hope that is something that they look to continue. Why would you change it? Honestly, they've had a lot of success doing it. So. The next big thing that came out of that game specifically for me was, man, Ottawa looked sloppy. 11 penalties for 98 yards on the day. And we just talked about it a moment ago, but Ottawa scored only 18 points on the day. They literally had the same output as the offense and defense for Montreal, but did not have a kicker who scored 21 points to add to that. So, I mean, they had a lot of mistakes. They had a lot of moments where they failed to keep the drives moving and stuff like that. And a lot of it was in part because of these penalties. It just seemed like they would get moving, or they would start off a drive and it would immediately have a penalty. Then there would be another penalty, and all of a sudden they're behind the sticks, and then it becomes a 3 and out real quick, or a 2 and out real quick. So they couldn't find any momentum, and like you said, their offense just looked bad in this game. And ultimately, they really, really missed Drew Brown. Matthew Schultz turned it over 3 times on top of that. So just a mistake-laden game for Ottawa. And as much as I hate to say it, you really have to wonder about the coaching after a game like that. Because
I mean, what did I tell you when you told me that Mathew Schultz was starting? What did I say? As an Ottawa fan, what did I tell you? I said good luck, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, it's hard because Ottawa was sloppy in week 1 with Drew Brown. Like, that ultimately is what killed Ottawa in week 1 too. In that game, Drew Brown might have thrown for, had a great game and thrown for over 400 yards and all that stuff, but you guys couldn't get out of your own way. I think in the first game, you guys, I think you mentioned it not last week, but the week before, that you guys had there was a combine of like 20 some odd penalties between the two teams or something like that. So coaching, they need to tighten it up. They need to find the discipline and find out what's going wrong with the discipline side of things, because they're drive killers. 9 out of the 10 penalties or 90%, I should say, of the penalties that you guys have done have killed drives and have absolutely destroyed any progress that you guys have made offensively, and moving forward. So whether it's Schultz or Drew Brown, if you guys don't find a way to be more disciplined, and I say you guys because you're the Ottawa fan, but if Ottawa doesn't find a way to do that, it's going to be a really long season for them, for sure. So
I definitely agree. I mean, they got to get this figured out. Last year, I was talking about how disciplined the roster was at points in time, and how we would make it through games with a couple penalties, and it seems like things have just changed dramatically. Now, obviously, having a backup quarterback in there, some of your timing's off. The cadence is different. I'm not trying to make excuses, but there are slight differences that you have to adapt to, but not to the point of producing 11 penalties in a single game. So that's definitely a concern moving forward. Speaking of concerns moving forward, transitioning over to Calgary and some news out of their camp. 3 Down Nation reported earlier this week that Benjamin Labrosse, he was their 2024 first-round pick, has been demoted after playing most of last season at halfback. He moved over to the cornerback position, was the top cornerback heading into the season, but he has since been demoted for a younger player behind him, who actually had a really good game, by the way. So what are your thoughts on Labrosse being demoted, and do you think this is just a motivational thing? Do you see him entering the starting lineup later on this season again?
I mean, I don't know if barring injury, I don't know if we'll see him in the starting lineup per se, but this is the interesting part of football, right? Like, we have a coaching staff making a decision. We have a coaching staff making a choice, right? They're taking a guy. They switched him from position, moved him to the secondary. So there's a little bit of an adjustment period for him there as well. Calgary wasn't very good last year across the board, so they probably were able to allow him to get some playing time there. And maybe he didn't develop the way they wanted him to, so they're going to demote him. Now it's up to him as a player to take this demotion not as an insult, but take it as a motivating factor. It reminds me of the Bryce Young situation that happened last year in Carolina, right? They benched Bryce Young. Andy Dalton came in, played, didn't do so hot. Eventually, Dalton kind of sputtered a little bit, and Bryce got an opportunity and chance to get back in. And when Bryce got back in, Bryce turned around and kind of lit a fire under the Carolina Panthers' ass. That's the same situation for this player. It is now up to him to decide whether or not he wants to be that guy and be him, or if he's going to just kind of sulk in like, oh, woo is me type pity party, and kind of just not do everything that the coaching staff is asking him to do to get back to that point. Do I think he's capable of it? Yes, I think everybody's capable of it. Will he do it is a different question, and you'll get a different answer. So we'll see how it portrays. But he was a first-round pick for a reason, so we know he's talented. It's just going to be whether or not he turns around and does what the coaching staff has asked of him, so he can come in and light that secondary, fire under that secondary's asses later on in the year if he's called upon.
I agree. And, Labrosse is one of those players that I'm very excited about in terms of his athletic profile. He was one of the top performers at the CFL Combine last year and somebody that I actually really wanted on Ottawa. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for him. But like you said, this is all about how he responds. If he's a guy who, wants to get upset because he got demoted and sulk and not really focus on what he needs to improve upon, this could end up spelling the end of his time in Calgary long term. Now, at the same time, I don't necessarily think we're at that point yet, and I think he has quite a bit of time before we get to that point. But it's about how he responds to this demotion. If he goes out and he's fighting for his job back, then chances are they're going to go ahead and stick with him and keep him around and try and continue to develop him and get him where he needs to be because he's got that athletic ability that is rare to find. At the CFL level in particular, and he's Canadian. So that's huge benefit for the ratio as well. So I was just kind of surprised to see it, and maybe he's a better fit at halfback. You can kind of play a little bit deeper in that secondary. You're allowed to kind of let the play come to you rather than being in more man coverage and stuff like that. So maybe it's just a situation where he needs to be stuck at halfback and he can work from that position going forward. But, one way or another, I think he's the type of player that you have to find a role for him on the field and get him back on the field and playing, even if it's just in spot duty. How else are you going to improve if you're not on the field?
Well, yeah, it's reality check for Labrosse, right? That's basically what it boils down to is this is a gut check time. This is a determination as to whether or not, like I said, how he responds to this. Is he going to take it as a unfair decision, or is he going to take it as a motivating factor? And if he takes it as a motivating factor mixed with his talent, he's going to be a nightmare for opposing offenses when he gets back on the field. So I hope that's what happens, and I hope Calgary's coaching staff sticks with him and supports him through the process, and hopefully he doesn't view it as an insult and more of a, okay, I need to be self-motivated to do this for myself or for the team more than anything, and myself,
Absolutely. We're going to hit a quick commercial break. I need to step away for a moment, and we will be right back.
Holidays! What carol are you going to sing?
Need a break from the holidays? Get last-minute game tickets at StubHub.
This is Current. It's the card my parents use to pay me for mowing the lawn, running errands, and doing well in school. This is the card I used when we got the idea to make our own clothes. And we spread the word, drove downtown, and sold everything we made. This is the card I use to do the things that really matter. This is Current. Visit current.com and download the app for free today.
Apparently we are back, and Sam is still not back yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and just fill in the time, I guess, at this point in time. I don't know what we have for news. Sam had all that stuff in front of him, and I hear Sam's kid. How you doing? Hi. Here on the CFL Showcase as well. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well. Make sure you hit up any of our sponsors as well. We Current and everything else here. We love all of our sponsors, and we use it here at the Shady Sports Network. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well. Make sure you hit the little notification dingy too, so that way you get all these great shows, including the CFL show that we do every Sunday morning as well. I wanted to discuss a little bit about Toronto while I'm waiting for Sam to get back here, because Toronto to me is in kind of a dangerous territory right now. They're 0-2. Chad Kelly is hurt. We don't know where Chad Kelly is going to be coming back. They are it's a long season, but it's not a long season. Now, we've seen slow starters before. I think Winnipeg started slow last year and ended up getting in, almost to the title game. But Toronto seems to be a team that is kind of going through this new roster makeup. We talked about the Kadeem Carey situation. Nick Arbuckle didn't play poorly this past week. It's just these receivers, a team like Toronto that used to have really strong receiving core just doesn't feel as strong this year. And if they don't get Chad Kelly back and he's able to correct this ship sooner rather than later, it could be a very long and nightmarish season for one of the best teams in the league. I did not expect this start. I don't know about you, Sam, but they are in danger of going 0-3 in my opinion when we get into our predictions here, because they play Saskatchewan next week. So it is a very, very, very potentially rough start for Toronto, and we may not even see them. They could be in danger of even missing the playoffs, to be honest with you.
If Nick Arbuckle continues to start, they are in danger of missing the playoffs.
I just say in danger. I'm not saying that they are going to. It's just, I mean, we don't know when Kelly's coming back yet. We haven't really heard a timeline yet.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing we do know is that he's on the 1-game injured list and not the 6-game. So they have a little bit of a timeline, I guess, but at the same time, that could be precautionary. Different people heal at different speeds. So that's one of the big factors here, that it's hard to tell if if or when Kelly is going to really make that move back to the field. So,
yeah.
But from an Ottawa fan perspective, good luck making the playoffs with Nick Arbuckle as your quarterback. There's a reason why I didn't want him here anymore. Similar to what you said about Matthew Schultz, he's a veteran guy. He'll play really well in spurts, but at the same time, if you go back and watch that Grey Cup, I mean, yes, he won the game. Yes, he was the MVP. And, you could make an argument that he was the most valuable player on that field because Chad Kelly wasn't there. But at the same time, I don't think that he's a quality starter. I don't think he's ever really been a quality starter in his career. He's one of those guys where realistically he's the type of backup that you can survive with him for a game, 2, 3, maybe. But you're seeing right here that, without that premier quarterback play, Toronto's just not the same team. They can't hang with some teams in the passing game. In week 1, they couldn't produce a rushing attack either. So, I mean, that also hampered them. And so, obviously, I give Arbuckle some credit for week 1 because he didn't have, any real support outside of, the passing game last week. But they had more of a rushing attack this week, and he still couldn't get going. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it's definitely a concern going forward if Chad Kelly can't come back, as soon as next week.
It's interesting to say that about a guy who threw for over 300 yards, but I mean, he did throw two interceptions. But for me, it's more the receivers. Like, I just don't feel like this receiving core outside of DeMontre Coxie is really threatening. There's not a guy behind them that I'm looking at going, oh, we should be scared of him. So it feels very one-dimensional for an offense that hasn't been one-dimensional in the past. And when you can't get the run game going like what happened in week 1, it really kind of leaves a little bit of a bitter taste in your mouth as a Toronto fan. So I can't even put this week 2 loss on Toronto, on Arbuckle, to be honest with you, because I don't think Arbuckle played poorly. I just really honestly think it's this receiving core. There's something missing. They don't have that dynamic player that they've had in the past, and maybe somebody shows out in the next few weeks, but I'll be honest with you, I truly am expecting them to be 0-3 after next week. So we can jump into our predictions if you want on this point, unless you had something else. But I really honestly, I don't know. If I'm a Toronto fan right now, I'm hoping that I have a Winnipeg bounce back like what happened a few years ago. But it's not promising right now if I'm a Toronto fan.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, one of the people in one of my group chats yesterday posed the question: When do we see Tucker Horn if Chad Kelly remains out? Do they end up going to Horn to see if he can give them a spark, much like they did with Cameron Dukes a couple years ago? And honestly, in hindsight, you have to wonder if there's any sort of buyer's remorse on opting to keep Arbuckle and get rid of Dukes after the way he performed last season. I know he wasn't exactly an elite quarterback either, but he had more mobility, could do some things that Arbuckle cannot, protected the ball a little bit better. So I mean yeah, if you're a Toronto fan at this particular point, you got to be a little concerned about what your team's doing. But I did have one more subject, and I'm not sure if you saw this ahead of time, so this might be a kind of a wash. But I'm curious if you see any players from the UFL making the jump to the CFL. If they're not getting the NFL interest that they would have expected. Like a couple seasons ago, we saw McLeod Bethel Thompson jump to the USFL from the CFL and then go right back again. So I'm curious if there are any players that you see off the top of your head that could potentially make that jump and or could potentially make the jump to just make the jump back again, if that makes sense.
I'm not 100% sure if there's any players that I can think of off the top of my head that will make a move like that, just primarily because the CBA, the new UFL CBA, was agreed upon. And that's great news for the UFL. It's great news for the players. And I feel like that we're going to start seeing a little bit more of. I know that a lot of people are talking about the attendance rates and all that stuff for the UFL, and their viewerships were a little bit down overall across the board as far as their actual numbers that were posted. That didn't include streaming numbers, which obviously who the hell knows what the streaming numbers are because they never get released. But I feel like that we're starting to see a little bit more of a stability, or we're going to start seeing the UFL's the rocky foundation that we see every year shift like this. I think we're going to start seeing kind of settle. Like, it might still be a little bit rocky here and there. They're going to have to make some moves, obviously, which always ruffles the feathers. But I think overall we're going to see a little more stability when it comes to the players wanting to return to the league, primarily because that CBA was signed. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you always want to see from a fan standpoint is the players want to be there, right? Like, they want to be at the UFL. So I think that you're going to start seeing some of these players that, like the Jordan Tiamus of the world and the Luis Perez's. Like, Luis Perez just moved to Arlington. He plans on doubling down and making sure that he ends out his career with the UFL if he can. I think you're going to start seeing some of those players that do that. They might go to like the NFL for a camp invite and be a camp arm, but I think they realistically understand the chances of making those rosters aren't very high. But I think most of those players that you see at that level are going to want to focus more on just getting to the UFL the following year and just focusing on playing there. You might get a few guys that are a little bit maybe on the little bit lower of the roster side, of the UFL. They may not get a camp invite and they may still want to play football to stay in football shape. So they may move up north if they're capable. But there's not like a particular player that stands out to me that's going to do that. And if it is, you're probably talking offensive linemen, you're probably talking defensive linemen, and you're probably talking secondary would be the three positions that you would really see, because let's face it, in any level of football, finding that depth is very hard. So I don't think any of the quarterbacks will. I think McLeod Bethel Thompson, I think honestly his heart was always with the CFL. That's why he did that. But I don't really see it anywhere else as far as any like true impact. I don't want to say impact, but like true impact players doing that per se.
That's fair. I mean, I don't necessarily know that it'll ever be, a true partnership per se, but one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up is because, we've seen a lot of players play in both leagues in a single calendar year. And there's been some talk of the UFL moving their season back, their start time back to February. So, I mean, personally, I think that would be a good thing, for all parties involved. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I think first of all, you gain a lot more interest directly after the Super Bowl. But then on top of that, you also open up the possibility for some of these players to double dip, which I know sounds counterintuitive. why would I want my players to go to another league? Well, the reality of it is if you set up the season like that, the UFL and CFL would not overlap at all at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a very realistic possibility where you could have players play in both leagues and play football year round. Now, obviously, you'd have to be a unique athlete to be able to make that happen. That's a lot of football games in one season, with very little time in between, because essentially it'd be like a 2-week gap between when the championship was played for the UFL and then the start of the preseason for the CFL. But I think there are some players that make some sense, and like one player that I would be looking at in particular to make that jump up to the CFL this season that I think is very probable for him to make that jump again. It's Saosi Mariner from the Michigan Panthers. Former CFL guy, spent some time with a couple different teams up there, ends up signing with Michigan this year to play some receiver and hopefully get on the field. He ends up having a pretty solid season. Maybe he can go back to the CFL now and be a little bit more cemented in his role with the team rather than being the back end of the roster guy for a CFL team. I mean, I do like what you said about the CBA changing some things, because obviously making another $1,250 per game if you're on the active roster, that's a significant amount for sure. Plus the year-round healthcare. But I wonder, that's a whole nother question as well. I wonder if signing with another league means your health insurance is no longer valid for the whole season.
And that's part of the other thing is with the CBA part of it, and that's why I said you're going to start seeing a little bit more of the stability side of things, because the players negotiated this, right? This was for the players wanted this. The year-long healthcare was extremely important to them, and that tells me that they're dedicated. Part of them are dedicated to making sure that this league works, like that it's a home to them. Like that's what the players wanted, right? So that's why I don't think you're going to see it. And honestly, Saosi Mariner, I don't see him going back to the CFL. I think if we see him go anywhere, he's going to be a camp body, a preseason guy on the NFL level. And even if he gets cut, I think he's just going to hover around, like maybe bounce off and on taxi squads a little bit. But I think he'll be back with the Michigan Panthers next year as a wide receiver for them, as probably the primary wide receiver for them, to be honest with you, because of the year he had this year. And like I said, that CBA is going to be a huge step. I know the league probably is not looking at it at this point in time in that nature, but that CBA agreement and the fact that they were able to come to that agreement is going to be a huge stability factor for the UFL moving forward, which I think could hurt the CFL with gaining some of those players coming back off the end of their season. So, I think it's just going to be a matter of time before we start seeing 2-year, 3-year deals with the UFL, as long as they can continue to grow. And that's going to be the biggest part, is can they continue to grow? So.
No, I think you make a good point there as well. And I think that you hit the nail on the head when you're saying that, that move to bring in the year-round healthcare and stuff like that is 100% because players want to make the UFL, a significant league that they can play in for many years and play their career out in. And I think why else would you be fighting for the things that you fought for,
Right.
I mean, it makes perfect sense to me that's the overarching goal for these players. But at the same time, I look at the financial differences with the CFL and the UFL, and I have to wonder if that's not enough to promote some of these guys to give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may not be, and some guys may still end up making that move and forgetting about the healthcare side of things. But the league will look at it a certain type way, and it may deter some players from making that move to just try to jump back. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. We'll see how it happens. I'm very curious to see what happens with it, though. But starting the year later is not helping those players. I don't know if enough of them are going to be able to jump into a team in the CFL and acclimate right away. It may not even be worth going up there, to be honest with you, with the fact that the season ended so much later than it had the year before. So, but we'll see. either way.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, this was just one of those topics that I felt like, with the UFL season ending, it was worth having a little bit of a discussion over. But really, no reason to think that there's going to be a huge mass exodus from the UFL by any stretch, of course. But maybe a player or two. We'll see. It's just something to keep an eye on and consider moving forward.
Yeah, for sure.
One more big topic of the week that I wanted to discuss real quick. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but the CFL announced their 2025 Hall of Fame class. So 5 different players are being inducted, as well as 2 prominent roster builders. Offensive lineman Brian Chu, Jovan Alafoye, wide receiver Jermaine Copeland, defensive back Scott Flagel, and linebacker Daryl Hall, I apologize, will be elected in the player category, while Glenn Johnson and Frank McChrystal will enter as builders. So obviously, kudos to those guys. Congratulations on great careers, and it's awesome to see the players being recognized for what they did for their teams. One of those guys, I believe it was Brian Chu, if I'm not mistaken. He is currently the head coach at a college program where he used to play. And so they got to tell him that he was inducted in the Hall of Fame. And I saw that video and thought it was really cool. A real touching moment. You can see him tear up and just kind of realize that, everything he worked for all those years, paid off and he gets the recognition that he deserves. So awesome to see that. Any thoughts on that before we move on to our picks?
I mean, not really, just from a standpoint of, just more or less from a standpoint of, congratulations to them. Well-deserved for having great careers, and I'm glad that they're getting the recognition they deserve. So.
Absolutely. And one thing that I forgot to throw out there last year is our hearts go out to the Stiegel family who lost a son, way too early in life. He's a young guy. I honestly did not catch what happened to him, but regardless of what happened, and a parent should never have to bury a child. And, I can imagine today is hitting him pretty hardly. So in terms of Milt Stiegel, so, our hearts go out to them. That's a tough situation for any family to be through or to go through. So hopefully he can find solace in the fact that his son most likely had a very good life, and hopefully he can focus on the good things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that whole situation, I'm glad to see the moment of silence from a lot of those teams and stuff like that as well. It was nice to see them get recognized and, show of support. So.
Agreed. And it definitely seemed like the teams are all reaching out to him, and this goes beyond, color or color of the jersey that he wore during his team.
I knew we were going on that.
Yeah, it came out wrong there for a minute. I apologize, everybody, but I
knew we were going with that, though. I knew what you meant.
I'm glad, because for a minute there, I was like, "Whoa, okay, that's." But moving into our predictions, I'm having a hard time pulling up the betting odds at the moment, so we'll just go ahead and go down the games.
Yeah, I mean, we can just go straight forward. We don't need scores or anything like that. That's fine. I just figure it's nice to always get our little predictions in here just to see at the end of the year how things work. Congratulations on you, because I'm pretty sure you went 4-0 last week. I'm pretty sure it was you. So congratulations for you for undefeated week.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, we can't recall exactly who, but one of us went 4-0, one of us went 3-1. So, not tooting our horn or anything, but you might actually want to pay attention to our picks in the CFL. We might actually help you win some money out of it. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's kick off the Thursday night game. We got 2-0 Montreal traveling to the 0-1 Edmonton. That's a 7 p.m. game Thursday night. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Montreal. I just don't think Edmonton's there yet. As much as I love Trey Ford and I'm glad that he's starting, I don't have anything else to say. I just don't think that team is there yet, basically. Made some baffling offseason moves, had a weird draft, and I just don't think that they have any significant contributors to be able to help Trey Ford to upset the Alouettes right now, who are playing some of the best football in the league. So.
Yeah, I'm in lockstep with you there. Montreal is, if not the best team in the league right now, one of them. and Edmonton has a long ways to go. I have to kind of wonder if they continue to stick with Trey Ford and let him kind of work through some of his growing pains this season. That interception in week 1 that he threw, I can kind of see, some of the frustrating things he does from a coaching standpoint as to why he may have been on the bench as long as he was prior to this regime change. But at some point, you just got to let that guy work through it and either show you that he's not good enough or show you that he can be good enough long term. And I think with his athleticism, you have to give him the benefit of the doubt and figure it out, even if it's a full season that's just lost to his development. It might be worth it long term. So we'll see how things go, but I definitely got Montreal in this game. We have another lopsided game. Saskatchewan 2-0 is traveling to Toronto Friday night. That's a 5:30 p.m. game, Mountain Time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, or 7:30 p.m. Eastern. I apologize. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, we've got like a lot of bad teams hosting games this week. But who do you have in this one?
Well, I don't want to necessarily write off Toronto just yet as a bad team. I think they're just struggling right now. I think they have some things they need to figure out. If there's ever a trap game early in the year, this is the trap game, for Saskatchewan. I just think right now at this particular moment, one team is playing some of their best football and another team is kind of still trying to figure out how to put their pants on, one leg at a time. And unfortunately, that's Toronto. So I'm taking Saskatchewan in this game. I still think that they're in my opinion, the potential Grey Cup representation, from their conference, and they might be the best team in the league overall at this particular moment. I know it's early in the year, but Toronto really wants to try to avoid going 0-3. If Chad Kelly does play, it does significantly boost it. But I think even if Kelly plays, it's going to be a Saskatchewan win. So I'm taking Saskatchewan regardless of this against Toronto.
Completely agree on that one as well. You look over the past 2 weeks, Saskatchewan's defense has been playing really well. I mentioned it before. They like to run the ball and play defense, and so far they haven't allowed over 26 points. And honestly, I don't think Toronto is going to get there against this defense. So we shall see exactly how this game goes. But if Nick Arbuckle's starting, it's basically, more or less going to be a guaranteed win for Saskatchewan. So I think they move to 3-0 after this one, and then they really kind of cement their status as one of the best teams in the league this season. Moving on to the Saturday games, we've got the first game of the evening, kicks off at 4 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Mountain Time. You've got the 2-0 Calgary Stampeders hosting the 0-2 Ottawa Red Blacks, and I have a feeling I know which way you're going on this one. But what's your pick on this one?
Calgary has to be careful in this game. I don't like using the term trap game too early in the season, but this is a situation where Calgary is riding high, coming off 2 straight victories. They look like an offensive powerhouse. Vernon Adams is a great leader, so he may not let this team, kind of slip out of focus. But if there's ever a time for a team to lose focus, it's going to be coming off a big win like they had last week, right? So Ottawa is kind of like a wounded animal. We talked about the same thing with Toronto. Ottawa's in that boat as well. Drew Brown should hopefully be back this week for you guys. I can't imagine that he won't be, but who knows? Injuries are tricky. So, yeah, I don't know, man. This game is actually probably one of the harder ones than I think people think. It's not as clean cut as it is. I am going to take Calgary, but I think this is going to be a closer game than some people are projecting it to be.
That's fair. I can see this being a trap game for Calgary as well. And just to update everybody on the status of Drew Brown, this is per a guess via Bob Dice, an article 3 Down Nation wrote recently. If I were to hazard a guess, I would think Drew Brown could be ready for week 3. So that's good news for Ottawa fans. I think that changes some things in this game, and I definitely think it makes Ottawa a little bit more competitive overall. But I still think Calgary right now is rolling, and I've been saying it. I'll say it again. I really like what Calgary did this season in their rebuild. I think that they've built a really strong roster, and I think they are legitimately one of the more talented teams in the league this season. And I think it's going to continue to show this week when they get a win over Ottawa. On the flip side of things, I think that Ottawa is definitely going to have to make some changes moving forward to figure out exactly what their issues are, because right now on defense they couldn't stop anybody, and that secondary I know is really banged up. But at the same time, there's got to be a way to fix this. You let go of some veteran players this offseason, and you're counting on some really young guys, but at the same time, right now it's just not looking the way that anyone would have hoped. You gave up 39 points to Montreal last week and 31 points to Saskatchewan in week 1. If you continue to give up 30 points a game, this offense is probably not going to be able to score or outscore the opposing team that often, especially with the penalty issues. So one way or another, Ottawa's got some serious work to do moving forward if they were continuing to try and make the playoffs again, which, I mean, that's the whole goal, right? So why wouldn't you be? But they've definitely got some work to be done. The final game of this weekend, and works out perfectly for a Sunday morning show next week, is also on Saturday, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Winnipeg, 1-0, takes on BC, which is 1-1. I think this is probably the game of the weekend, honestly, in my opinion. But what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think it's the game of the weekend, and honestly, I think first and foremost, I ate crow this week with Chris Shevler. Our last show that we did, I talked about I wasn't overly optimistic about his throwing capability, and he proved me wrong. So kudos to him. And I ate crow this week because of Shrevler, which won't be the last time I eat crow, I'm sure, all season long. I got to take Winnipeg. I think this game is definitely going to be the game of the week, and it's going to be a close game. It's just very similarly to how I feel about the LFA until the Cadillos loss. Like, you have to take the team that constantly wins or consistently wins until they prove to you that they can't do it. And last week I thought might have been that week, and I was wrong. So this week I'm just going to pick Winnipeg, and maybe they prove me wrong again. I don't know. Maybe they lose. I'm not sure. BC's a strong team. This is going to be a very close game. It should be a very good game, hopefully, as well. And I'm just going to take Winnipeg in a very close game. Might come down to a rouge. I like those games.
That would make for a very interesting game for sure. Would not surprise me entirely. And I actually didn't realize this or didn't think about this, but Winnipeg and BC played each other last week too. So
yep.
Winnipeg, obviously found the win 34-20. So I will say I think this game will probably be closer. It's in BC, so that's obviously going to be a benefit to them. At the same time, I think that we learned a little bit more about Nathan Rourke in week 2. Maybe that game in week 1 was not the breakout performance that we all thought it was at the time. Obviously he was playing Edmonton and not Winnipeg. So that could be potentially something to watch. He did not look very good in this past game. So it'll be a matter of how he performs. If he goes back out there and completes less than 50% of his passes, throws an interception, he's probably going to be the team to lose again. If he can protect the ball, make the high percentage throws, and the coaching staff can build something around him to let him get the ball out of his hand fast, I think we could see a BC win in this one. So I really think that this is going to be a really good game, but I'm with you on this one. You got to pick the team in Winnipeg that wins consistently, right? It's just too much of a gamble for me right now to take BC. So, I mean, as far as that goes, it looks like all of our picks match this week, which actually is somewhat surprising. But, that just means that you're probably going to get one game out there that's an outlier that both of us are wrong But we'll see how things roll through this week. But any final thoughts, any subjects that we did not cover that you want to get to before we get out of here?
This pertains a little bit to the CFL, but not directly, because I don't think that this is what this post was supposed to be. But last night's UFL championship game, UFL Scoregami just posted that it was a golden scoregami and said that the score 58-34 has never happened in professional American football history. I don't think this includes like the ELF, the LFA, and like the European leagues or anything, but and I'm not sure it includes necessarily the CFL. However, I found that as being an interesting thing. So if there's any CFL fans out there that may want to dispute this, that know out of the viewers that we have that are sure that the 58-34 score happened in the CFL at some point in time in history, feel free to correct us, hit us in the comments, or correct the UFL Scoregami and let them know, like, hey, broaden your scope, because I almost guarantee this probably has happened in Europe somewhere, but I just thought that was actually interesting as far as America is concerned in the States, and I just wanted to tie that in a little bit with the CFL. So,
no, definitely. I mean, honestly, that's obviously you got a little bit of a loophole if you're calling it American football versus Canadian football, but football's football at the end of the day. So I'd be curious to see if that's a score that had happened in the CFL. That scoregami stuff, man. I don't know where or how they find all the numbers going back as far as they do, but it's impressive. Whoever runs those pages, good for them, because I definitely do not have the time or effort to look through all that stuff. That's for sure. Wanted to shout out everybody who's joined us today. We've 50 live viewers right as we're about to call it quits here. I appreciate everybody who tuned in. If you have not done so yet, hit the like button. Would love to hit 15 to 20 likes on every video, no matter where you're watching right now. That helps tell that platform that they should suggest this to other new viewers. And the goal is to grow this show long term and become hopefully one of the premier CFL podcasts in America, which, obviously there's not many of them. So hopefully that's a pretty quick, easy race to the top, especially with my friend and colleague Reed Johnson from the Markcast saying that he will not be covering the CFL this year. That opens up a huge gap there, which really bummed to hear that. He had some great coverage, was at the Grey Cup the past couple seasons. Really one of the best alternative football podcasts out there on the market. So if you have not checked him out already, I strongly recommend you check out the Markcast as well as Alternative Football Digest as well. Also, if you are a CFL fan and you prefer to read content rather than listen to it, I strongly recommend you check out Shady Sports Network. I have been on a CFL writing kick recently. I've got 3 articles that came out over the past 2 weeks. I've got a couple more in the works, probably one that will be dropping either today or tomorrow. So definitely check those out, and we appreciate all your support. Like I said, hit that like button, comment, subscribe, tune in next Sunday, and we will have all the games to recap for you next week and discuss all the biggest news from those games as well. For myself, for my co-host Michael Washington, catch you guys next week. Have a great week.
Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.